New York, 1922. The parties were bigger, the morals were looser, and the liquor was cheaper.
Is this Gatsby?
Do you know him?
War hero.
Mr. Gatsby doesn't exist.
Gatsby? What Gatsby?
Right from the beginning, we can tell that this movie isn't a documentary about the Roaring Twenties, but this is a film that tells us a story of a Gatsby. But who's Gatsby, and what is the story about, and how will Baz Luhrmann decide to portray him? The film The Great Gatsby is based on the novel by the same name, written by F. Scott Fitzgerald. It is about Nick Carraway, who moves to West Egg in the summer of 1922. He visits his cousin Daisy, her husband Tom, and her friend Jordan, who all live in East Egg and are of old money. As the summer progresses, he eventually goes to one of Gatsby's famous parties, where he meets the mysterious Gatsby.
I'm Gatsby.
Later he finds out about a connection between Gatsby and his own cousin Daisy, and decides to set them up over tea. Gatsby and Daisy rekindle an old connection, and Daisy must eventually choose between Tom, her husband, or Gatsby, her lover. In his book Freud, Religion, and the Roaring Twenties, Henry Adema explained how the 1920s was a time where people shifted away from religious traditions and towards affluence and materialism. That's not surprising considering the 1920s was a time of massive wealth. The stock markets were so high that levels like that would not be seen again until 1954. There was definitely money to be made. Although the story takes place in America, a country that prides itself in having no nobility, the movie shows a clear division of the haves, America's pseudo-aristocracy, and the have-nots, America's peasants. In the book, Jordan is called tomboyish and scary. In the movie, we can clearly see how the director wants to show her masculine side. She towers over the frame when she gets up to greet Nick. At Gatsby's party, she's wearing a black dress, showing her tomboyish body. By contrast, Daisy isn't tomboyish at all, but she doesn't have any of the traditional responsibilities of women. She's careless, she's not passive and motherly, she's selfish for having an affair with Gatsby, and indecisive when it comes time to choose between him and her husband. Although the roles of women have changed, men are still pretty much the same. However, both genders and the society as a whole have embraced affluence and materialism. When someone is compared to Gatsby, they're essentially being compared to a self-made man. That's exactly what Jay Gatsby was. He represents a naive hope and endless opportunities that America can provide. Gatsby is a man of relentless ambition. He is a man who applied himself at everything he did and became something. He is a young man who had a vision for himself and made it reality. He is the ideal man. Tom Buchanan is a stark contrast to Gatsby. He is a man of old money who's never had to work a day in his life and who nobody likes. In the book, Tom is even referred to of smelling of anticlimax. He is a football player who peaked in high school. His main role in the book, and especially in the movie, is to contrast Gatsby. While Gatsby represents the new and mobility, Tom represents the old and stagnation. Baz Luhrmann can clearly contrast Gatsby wearing bright suits, and Tom always wearing the same old dark-colored suits. One thing both men have in common is their pursuit of a woman. In sexually dimorphic species, the females choose the males. Therefore, the more mates a male has, the more successful he is, reproductively speaking. This is no different than humans. Even though Tom is married to Daisy, he has an ongoing affair with Myrtle. He has a pretty wife and a chick on the side who he can do nasty things with. But later, on his way to the plaza, he finds out that George and Myrtle plan to move out west together. It's at that moment that Tom feels he's losing control.
Tom was feeling the hot whips of panic. His mistress and wife an hour ago, so secure, were both slipping from his control.
But the more famous example of acquiring a woman is Gatsby trying to win Daisy. Essentially, the entire film is about Gatsby courting Daisy and trying to win her back from her husband. Gatsby has come so far and achieved so much, yet he's still missing Daisy. the prized flower of his garden. Without her, the massive wealth and the effort is for nothing. To both men, acquiring a woman is tied to their identity as men. All throughout the movie, we're led to believe that Gatsby getting all these things for her is a noble endeavor. It's all out of love after all. But maybe not. In a deleted scene, Gatsby says that her voice is full of money.
She loves you. Her voice is full of it. No. Her voice is full of money.
It may be that Gatsby really did like her, or it may be that he only wants Daisy because she's rich and from a wealthy family. She's everything he's not and everything he wants to be. She's the last piece of the puzzle to make his life whole. She's essentially his prize and nothing more. And a study done with college students, a hypothetical model was paired with photographic stimuli of either a luxurious apartment or a normal, neutral apartment and asked to rate their attraction on a scale from 1 to 10. Female undergraduates found men with luxurious apartments to be significantly more attractive, while there was no difference found in males. At some level, we all know females like wealthy men. And at some biological level, Gatsby knows this. In order to get Daisy, he must be wealthy. To Gatsby's credit, his plan of getting Daisy to fall in love with him partly worked. After tea at Nick's, Gatsby shows Daisy his mansion. Daisy's running around his mansion like a little girl, amazed at all things. When Gatsby is throwing his expensive shirts at her, she starts crying. Her regret of 5 lost years hits deeper than the viewer realizes. Daisy received Gatsby's letter telling her to wait for him, but she played it safe and married Tom Buchanan instead. Those years ago, she made what psychologists would call an error. A type 1 error, a false positive, is essentially hearing a fire alarm, but there's no fire. A type 2 error is a false negative. It's as if there was a fire, but the fire alarm never goes off. According to error management theory, we humans make decisions based on heuristics and biases, and this could lead to errors. It gets interesting when one looks at the perception and cognitive biases between the genders. When it comes to perceived sexual interest of the opposite sex, men make more type 1 errors, assuming interest when there is none, and women make more type 2 errors, assuming no interest when there actually is one. And it was this mistake that Daisy made years ago, assuming that Gatsby would never make something of himself. Chose the safe option and married the man who was already rich. It's only years later that she realized her mistake, and by extension, the time lost. In the film, Jay Gatsby is the only self-made man. His ambition took him places and gave him the things he dreamt about. But he came short. Gatsby not only wants Daisy to love him and leave her husband for him, he also wants her to tell him she never loved him. Essentially, who wants to undo the past? Gatsby wants perfection. He wants too much. He's too ambitious. And it's this implicit argument that Lerman makes throughout the film. Gatsby throws overly massive parties in the hopes that Daisy will walk in one day. Lerman consciously over-exaggerates these parties. Gatsby over-prepares when meeting with Daisy for tea, bringing a team of workers and a room full of flowers, when in the book there was no flowers and there was only one person to mow the lawn. A classic technique Lerman uses is zooming in, perhaps a little too much, but it's all for emphasis. He zooms in on Gatsby when we first meet him to exaggerate how great he actually is. After all, the movie is about him. Lerman's technique of controlled chaos is used so often, and with so much happening at the same time, it can be nauseating. At the end of the movie, we're disgusted, not only with Daisy, but with the rest of the characters as well, with the filmmaking, and with the movie as a whole. But that's the genius of Lerman. It's what happens to make him the perfect director for this movie. You're not meant to like the characters or the movie itself. You're meant to go home repulsed at it all. The movie came out in 2013, just 5 years after the 2008 recession, and it seems like history is repeating itself. Lerman shows the carelessness of the wealthy.
They were careless people, Tom and Daisy. They smashed up things and people and retreated back into their money and their vast carelessness and let other people clean up the mess they had made.
Throughout the film, we're taken back to a time when things are great. And we too, just like Gatsby, may want to live in that past. You see Gatsby and all that he has accomplished, and you picture yourself doing the same. But we can't get carried away. We can't be too ambitious and try to do the impossible and try to relive the past. Because maybe the future is better.
Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning